This is Katelynn Richardson with the Daily Caller News Foundation. Today I'm here with Acting Chair of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Andrea. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I just want to start out big picture. You're leading now, but you were a commissioner in the past 4 years in the Biden administration as well. What are some of the changes you've seen and implemented in the commission since you've started?
Yeah, so I actually started as a Trump appointee at the tail end of the first Trump administration. And then I stayed on through the Biden administration. And a lot of monumental change in the last few years. The most notable one, of course, is finally taking back the White House, and therefore substantial leadership changes with me in control of the commission, and then the president obviously driving the agenda. The president also fired two of my colleagues, so finally reasserting the executive power in the agency. So we will be able to regain the majority sooner, and we'll hopefully have a quorum again coming soon. So a lot of swings back and forth, and that's in part because the agency is an executive branch agency, which is a subject of debate right now. My colleagues are claiming that it isn't. Who got fired, but it absolutely is. And so the agency across presidential administrations goes back and forth, appropriately so, right, with the will of the executive and the will of the people, the American people who voted the president into power. So we have a tremendous chance to turn a big page and restore the agency back to what I think, the founding principles of the civil rights movement and the founding principles of our country. And we're starting to do a lot of that in the last few months.
Yeah, one of the things you've mentioned frequently is the way identity politics has been embedded in civil rights law, and civil rights law has been used to advance some of these ideas. Can you talk about what the proper use of civil rights law is?
Yeah, I think it's really important to start with first principles. If you don't understand those first principles, you're not going to be able to use the civil rights laws appropriately and well. Right, as a conservative, it's important for me that we're driving conservative principles in the application of the laws, not just saying, well, I want to do less of something, right? This isn't about protecting only businesses or protecting only workers. It's about figuring out what the actual founding statutes are, and also thinking about the big picture themes of our country, which is every single human being is created equal, inherently imbued with dignity by God, and that's the only reason why you are going to have concepts of equal protection, concepts of equal opportunity, not this Marxist theory of identity politics, which is just driven by power struggles and who's a victim and who's an oppressor. All of those concepts are the left's answer and the left's vision of civil rights. I think they really co-opted what was previously a beautiful bipartisan decision to fulfill the founding promises of our country. Again, that people were created equal and have equal dignity and worth. And that promise was fulfilled in the civil rights laws to say everyone has an equal shot, equal opportunity, but that doesn't guarantee your outcome, right? You'll be judged on your skills and your merit and your ability, and not on the color of your skin. All of those things are so consistent with our country's founding. But the left really warped that and turned it into this terrible power structure. That's really, we say it's woke. Well, it's Marxism. That's what it is.
Yeah, so let's get into that a little bit more. Over these past few months, you've taken a lot of actions. There's been settlements. There's been new lawsuits filed. Do you want to touch on what you think some of the biggest ones have been?
Yeah. So, right off the gate, after spending sort of 4 years in the minority and thinking about what we needed to do, I launched a set of priorities, which are, they're the president's priorities. Mine just happened to overlap with him. And it's, laying siege to the institutions and taking them back is the big picture theme. And then within that, it's again, attacking identity politics that we've seen in DEI and restoring a focus on equality of opportunity. The bearing fruit of that you could see with some of the law firm settlements, bringing some of the world's largest law firms to the table and having them agree to recommit to merit and equality and disavow DEI in their workplaces. And those are really important because of the linchpins, they have been advising the Fortune 500 on a bunch of their practices. When you have the law firms change course, you're going to also have a ripple effect for a lot more things. So that's, I think, one of the big wins on DEI.
Right. President Trump has been taking a lot of initiative on law firms as well with some of the executive orders, targeting security clearances and things like that. Could you expand a little bit more on this? Why did the law firms become so involved in perpetuating identity politics and some of this DEI?
I think across the board, all of the elite institutions of our country arrived on a singular answer to really complicated questions, right? There's no question our history as a country has been marred by racial politics and the wages of slavery. Those are hard topics that people can debate about, be concerned about, care about, but there was a singular answer to that in 2020 and in the last few years. And every single elite institution said the only way to respond to this is to try to fix one wrong with more wrongs and to engage in, overt affirmative action, preferential, group-based identity preferences. And that's the wrong answer. But that you see that sort of universally. It's not consistent with what I think the American people believe as voters. But you had elite institutions from top nonprofits to top Fortune 500 companies to law firms to consulting companies, all sort of arrive at that decision and push down this really cultural revolution. And so pushing back on that means going back at the cultural movers, right? The elite institutions that drove things, the elite institutions like elite universities, the elite law firms, the elite consulting companies, right? All of the key focal points. The administration is pushing back at those who moved it fast. Well, when you focus on them, you're going to be able to change the culture more broadly.
Speaking of universities, you recently had a pretty significant settlement with Columbia University, $21 million, I believe. And this is one of the biggest in the EEOC's history. Could you elaborate on what makes this so significant?
Yeah, it's so exciting to finally be able to talk about it. And it was an amazing whole of government effort to do this. From the EEOC side of the portion, so we, I think, were quieter. There had been a lot of news about the various cabinet agencies involved in that up until the point we sort of finalized the deal. And that's because the EEOC is bound by really tight confidentiality requirements. So I actually teed it up initially from a commissioner's charge back in the Biden administration. When I saw the rising flood of anti-Semitism, I filed a commissioner's charge. It's a statutory tool that Congress gave each commissioner, but has been rarely used by Republicans and much more used by Democrats. And so I launched that, and it sort of floundered during the Biden administration. But the Biden administration had every opportunity to take this kind of settlement, every opportunity to deal with this issue, and they didn't. That vehicle was there ready for them to do something with it. And it just sat. And then when I came into power, in the chair's role, then we were able to drive it really forward and supplement additional investigations by multiple other, parts of the federal government. And the EEOC's component is so powerful because it's remedial. We're going to be able to actually take that entire $21 million is going to be going towards people who were victims of anti-Semitism who are affected by the hostile environment on Columbia's campus. So none of it's a fine, none of it goes to the EEOC. It's really directly to victims. And those victims don't have to have attorneys. That's another really powerful thing. So if someone was aggrieved by what happened on Columbia's campus, they don't have to go out and seek an additional attorney to get a portion of that. All they have to do is reach out to the EEOC. So it's a great way to really directly help people who are harmed.
Is that a tool you see being used for other universities or in other instances?
Our goal always at the agency is to be seeking remedies for victims. We're an exclusively charge-driven agency. We don't make grants. We don't control billions of dollars. Our money, almost the entirety of the agency's budget is staff providing the services to workers and to getting money for people who have been harmed. So yeah, every time we're involved, we're always going to be trying to push for that. We also are seeking for things like terms and equitable relief. So prospective relief can be really important. And so there'll be different mixes of what makes sense. An example of that is the really exciting Mercy Health COVID-19 vaccine resolution that we just announced today. It's $1 million, which is a great monetary component for hundreds of people. But a really important injunctive part of it is we actually have secured reinstatement for workers who were fired or pushed out of their job during that. So that's so important because money is never going to completely upset the bad apple cart, right? When a worker has been harmed and shoved out of their job, you can give them money to try to help compensate that. But the chance to go back into their well-paying job at a solid hospital system, that can really change the course of someone's life. So we're really excited by that reinstatement portion as well.
Yeah, so many workers were impacted by COVID vaccine mandates and didn't have religious accommodations, as several other cases that you either filed or settled recently have shown. Do you want to touch on some of those as well?
Yeah. It's one of, I think, the greatest civil rights violations in the last, few decades. We had thousands of charges filed during fiscal year 22 alone. We got almost 13,000 religious accommodation requests. That was 20% of our charge load, right? And we know that there were many other thousands of people who were being pushed out of their jobs or were not being accommodated for their sincere religious beliefs. And there were requests to have any number of reasonable accommodations to not be shoved out of their job during the COVID-19 vaccine mandate push. So that 13,000 was probably only a fraction of it, but still a huge portion for us. And despite that, I brought almost no lawsuits during the Biden administration on that. We had one or two near the very end, small groups of people. And in contrast, in just the last few months, we've had multiple ones. We've had some significant settlements. We've had this big $1 million settlement. Now, the agency was doing some work, but it was always doing it quietly. It was shoving it under the rug, right? It didn't want to push it because it wasn't the right narrative, apparently, for the Biden administration. So we actually did recover $55 million for individuals who had filed some sort of really reasonable accommodation with a religious or disability related to the COVID-19 vaccine mandate between the Biden administration and the Trump administration. $55 million is a lot of money, but basically none of it's been public. It was all confidential settlements that were really hushed up. We're not doing that anymore, right? When we secure an important religious liberty victory, we're going to talk about it wherever we can. That's obviously something we'll always have to negotiate, but it's important to us to say religious liberty isn't a second-class right. It matters. It's a first liberty. It's a first principle. It's foundational. The agency's here to do that, and we're going to not hide it under the rug like it's some dirty little secret that we're helping workers who were harmed here.
Why is it that some of those cases that were taken on during the Biden administration were done quietly?
So a huge portion of our work in general is confidential. It's not all, malfeasance here. Not every worker wants to publicly announce that, and I get that, right? A huge portion of what we're doing at any particular moment is our charge load, where we're investigating things actively. And so people do have the opportunity for like a negotiated settlement or a conciliation agreement. Sometimes it's private, sometimes it's public. Only a small portion of our work actually gets to the litigation stage. And up until the point at which it is a public resolution or a subpoena enforcement action or a lawsuit, we can't talk about it. So there's some level of quiet. But of course, the agency can decide to some degree and control what kinds of cases and what matters it wants to drive forward towards litigation, what things they want to spotlight, what they want to try to negotiate to be public, what do they want to talk about. And there was clearly a conscious decision not to spotlight those issues given the volume of the charge load and the very small output. Other things were spotlighted. Other things were priorities.
Can you talk about some of the other religious discrimination cases that you have right now? I know there's several others on other topics besides COVID-19 vaccine mandates. What are those other issues?
Yeah, we recently filed a really interesting lawsuit out of our Chicago district involving an employee who had posted some religious verses and Bible verses on his own personal social media account. It didn't reference his workplace or his employer in any way. And his employer talked to him about it, and he said, "Can I keep on doing it?" And they said yes. And he posted again on his again, completely personal social media accounts, and he got fired after doing so. So we brought that lawsuit recently. We also recovered close to $1 million recently against several different casinos for a host of religious accommodation requests that they had denied. So anything from the request to be able to have a beard, or to be able to take off time for a prayer service, to wear a skirt instead of pants. There's a lot of low to no cost accommodations that employers sometimes routinely refuse. And we were really excited to be able to gather that much money for employees who were harmed from that failure to accommodate.
You've mentioned a couple times now, first on the Columbia settlement, you started that during the Biden administration, and then on some of the COVID vaccine cases, that there just wasn't progress during that. Are there any other instances you saw of that happening, but where they're now moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think DEI is a good example where the agency didn't go crazy woke in that space, but it also didn't address a bunch of obvious harm that was happening, where we had, again, the entirety of the Fortune 500 and all these elite institutions trumpeting their racism, saying that the answer to complex harms were only more racism. That the only way to, I mean, the words of Ibrahim Kendi, right? The only way to remedy past discrimination is present discrimination. The only way to remedy present discrimination is future discrimination. These violations were overt and everywhere, and the agency could have stood up and said and done something about it, and they didn't. So I can't talk about what charges may have been in our, I have to keep that confidential, but in terms of the leadership, the bully pulpit that we could have done, there really was a falling down on the job. I tried to use my own individual bully pulpit wherever I did, and especially in the wake of Students for Fair Admission, had a lot more traction speaking to many employers and many groups about this accurate state of the law. One of the reasons the agency didn't go as woke, but just sort of had a failure of omission, not commission, in terms of DEI, was that the law is actually quite conservative in this space. And my colleagues, they knew that, right? We didn't radically disagree about the law. They just didn't like necessarily what the law said. And that was that the general rule was you cannot show racial preferences, period. You can't take race into consideration in whole or in part. If your decision, your employment action is motivated in any way by race or sex or another protected characteristic, it's unlawful. There's no DEI exception to that rule. There's no diversity as a plus factor. It was a very different and more conservative set up and state of the law than the university systems were prior to Students for Fair Admission. But everyone really focused on the university setting where you used to be able to use diversity as a plus factor in admissions, and they kind of ported that over into employment law. That wasn't the case. It was never the law. It's definitely not the law now, but it wasn't before. My colleagues didn't really like that, but they also weren't willing to completely ignore the state of the law. So all they could really do is just stay quiet or sort of foment the confusion and not clean it up. Now that we've got the Trump administration, we're making it very clear. The law is clear. It's not new. This is never okay. There's no good form of race discrimination. Every form of race discrimination is abhorrent and needs to be stamped out. And one of the things, in addition to settlements, we did was just issue some really clear technical assistance. It's not a guidance document because we already had guidance documents that made these things clear, our race discrimination guidance. And this is just an application point, some further clarification resources to help educate the public about how DEI can turn into unlawful race discrimination.
What do you think it will take for companies to fully understand that and stop some of these programs that have been problematic, or do you think that we're already on that track?
I think a lot of companies have done a lot of audits in the wake of Students for Fair Admission, but you still have some holdouts, and you certainly have not a full reckoning for the harm that has occurred. And I don't think that that's going to happen until we have, some lawsuits, some continued significant settlements, some continued lawsuits. People need to understand that there's a cost, right? A lot of companies want to just sort of memory hole what happened from 2020 to 24. You don't get to do that. There's a cost to your bad behavior, And we're going to exact that cost one way or the other because we're going to remedy victims who were harmed. But that also takes people raising their hand and saying this happened. So we're charge driven. So we're going to do as much as we can. But the more people can raise their hand, speak out against it, that's very important for us to be able to remedy what happened.
In 2024, there was also guidance published on sexual orientation and gender identity, which I know recently was struck down by a federal court. Where are we on that now, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so it was the agency's harassment guidance, a long in the works document that it covers a variety of harassment law, but the most notable part is on SOGI issues, sexual orientation and gender identity. And in that document, even though we have no substantive rulemaking authority, the majority Democrat commission decided to take effectively the rule, the regulatory position through the means of a guidance document, effectively eliminating single sex spaces at work. And I think it is a little more explosive than people even realized, right? There's a lot of focus on what the Biden administration did in the Title IX context, but to take the position that in every single private workplace that the EEOC touches, which is just all about every single workplace, anybody with 15 employees or more can no longer have sex-separate bathrooms, locker rooms, sleeping quarters, any kind of private facility where you would normally have male and female, and that you had to have gender identity access to all of those things, or also be harassment, is revolutionary. It's in a bad way, right? In an awful way. And they did it with no authority. Unfortunately, because it was passed by a commission majority vote, I can't completely unwind it. What I could do when I was in the minority is write a long, serious dissent about it and tee it up for litigation. And then we saw multiple different states sue over the guidance. And then, like you said, recently, a federal court struck it down and vacated it. So we've indicated that it's been vacated on our website. We've grayed out the parts that have been vacated, but we can't completely pull it down or change it until we have a quorum and a majority vote. So we're there. We're close. Not for lack of wanting to just fix it completely, but we need that quorum. So which is hopefully soon on the way.
I believe there are also some lawsuits filed relating to transgender discrimination by the EEOC. Could you fill us in on where those are as well?
Yeah, so near the tail end of the Biden administration, again, once they finally got their Democrat majority, they pushed forward 7 different lawsuits involving gender identity. And in the wake of the Trump administration turnover, and then also the president's executive order on defending women, it was clear that we needed to withdraw from those lawsuits. So there was no way that we could pursue those and comply with things like biological reality and referring to people by biological pronouns and reality. So I directed that those all be closed, and we gave individuals the opportunity to intervene. So individuals who wanted to proceed with it, they could, but it was no longer on behalf of the United States. From the United States, because we litigate on behalf of the United States, it was important to say, this isn't the lawsuit we're bringing. Those individuals, if they want to proceed, they can go try their chances in the federal courts, but it's not going to be the federal government driving that forward anymore.
So it's only been a few months that you've been acting chair, and already there's been so much action, so much change. What can Americans look forward to over the next year, next couple years? More broadly, what are your priorities going forward?
Yeah, I think, my priorities remain the ones that I announced from the start, and they're, very complementary and in conjunction with the president's broad-based agenda, a restoration of the American workers' dignity focused on individual rights, not on group identity. And the application points of that of, stamping out unlawful race discrimination where it arises from DEI, pushing back on illegal immigration and preferences for foreign workers at the expense of American workers. That's something we haven't talked about yet, but that's an important priority for me. I think everyone understands that Title VII protects preferences against foreign workers, right? So certainly if someone has a background from another country, the law prohibits employers from preferring other people instead of that worker, but it goes both directions. So if a company is importing illegal aliens or migrant workers or visa holders and preferring them for whatever reason, bias, cost, it doesn't matter, at the expense of American workers, that's national origin. And it really ties in with the president's immigration agenda, but it also is just the right thing to protect American workers. They should have equal rights to anybody in their country. This is their country. So that's an important priority to continue the Commission's work on that. We had a big victory related to that at the beginning of the Trump administration as well. We got $1.4 million for American workers who had been discriminated against in favor of Japanese workers in a resort at Guam. So again, getting some results early on. You should expect more of that. We'll continue to defend women, and we'll say basic things like there are men and there are women, and biology is real and it's not bigotry. We're going to keep on working there, and we're very interested in defending women's rights in the workplace. So wherever someone is seeing harm there, I hope they'll raise their hand and they know they'll be taken seriously. And then we're going to, just continue to push forward on all the religious liberty work that we've been doing. More to come on all of those fronts.
Yeah, well, you have full plate ahead. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and thanks for taking the time.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Really, really appreciate the opportunity.